Today we need to talk about the topic of the skull and Calvary. The skull consists of two main parts, the neurocranium and the vas ovum. The neurocranium refers to the upper part of the skull that protects the brain. This provides protection for the central nervous system, especially the brain. The second part is called the vas ovum or facial skull. It refers to the lower part of the skull. In contrast to the neurocranium, the brain guard protects the vas ovum, the facial structures, and the respiratory tract. But together, the neurocranium and the vas ovum form the entire skull and fulfill different protection and functions in the head area and the bones. And now the skull, the calotte or the Calvary. The skull, the calotte, the upper part of the skull that forms the brain protection, consists of three main layers: the lamina externa, the diplo, and the lamina interna. The lamina externa, this is the outer bone layer of the skull, the calotte. It consists of compact bones. The diplo is located between the external lamina and the internal lamina. It is a cancellous bone. The diplo layer that contains blood vessels and red bone marrow. This is diplo's most important job. And the last, the lamina interna, is the inner bone layer of the skull, calotte, which attaches directly to the brain. Similar to the lamina externa, the outer layer consists of compact bones and provides additional protection for the brain. Here is another summary of the skins. Integuments or mouths, various parts, for example the skull bones, then the hard meninges, duramates, and then the arachnoids and the soft meninges or pyramates, which are directly connected to the brain. There's something important here. There's also a space called the subarachnoid space. This is the area between the arachnoid and the soft meninges or pyramid. And now the outer and inner skull bases, the partial position, the cut areas. Talking about that a little bit now, we don't need all of them, a little bit like that. For example, some steps are more important, like pre-armed ovals or pre-armed rotundos. Yes, for example, pre-armed jugulars. What about forearm jugular short? It stands out two bones. Part of it here is occipital and the other part here is temporal. This is a good trick that can make the difference. For instance, the other holes are missing here, such as the canalis carotitis or the other parts. Now we must talk about our main subject, the sulfinsides, which enter and exit through various places. And they have different tasks, such as with smell, vision, and eye muscles. It's also something general, the position, and maybe in the end we can see that better and understand it better. Now we don't need that, so now the first walking speed is called the olfactory nerve. This consists of two parts here, olfactory, and another, the olfactory tract. What is important about the nerves is that we know the main functions that pass through the skull. These two things are the most important. So now let's start with the passage. The olfactory nerves pass through the lamina cribriformis. The lamina cribriformis is part of the ethmoid bone. And here is the base of the skull. And this is definitely where the anterior skull pit is. And the main function is sensory. It is somewhat sensory. Here is the olfactory bulb and the olfactory bulb. patient can also be examined here at the front of the otalic nerve, and particularly the supraorbital nerve. The first is the caesura pterygiduropon, followed by the maxillary nerve. There is a pathway here, starting with the rotundum, then comes the trigopalatine fossa, and lastly the inferior orbital caesura. And the pterygiduropon is located at the infraorbital. And here is the inferior orbital caesura. We will discuss this better and in more detail when we talk about the bones. And lastly, changing from the mandibular nerve, particularly the mental, is the pterygiduropon. And the main function of these nerves, the otalicus nerve in front of the upper face, the rides in front of the lacrimal gland, sitting bone count, eye drop, everything is sensitive. The maxillary nerve is in front of the middle face, teeth and gums of the upper jaw, palate and nasal cavity, and paranasal sinuses, all sensitive. It's the middle facial bone, so that should be in front of the upper jaw's tooth and gums. And the mandibular nerves in front of the lower face, rides, teeth and gums of the lower jaw, the tongue, all sensitive. But there is something very important here in front of the mandibular nerve. It is in front of the masticatory muscles. The masticatory muscles are in front of the mandibular nerve, and it is motor. Chewing muscles and motor. It's not sensitive. This is very important. That's the details. Again, we talked about it. Now let's move on to nerve number 7, the facial nerve. The facial nerve, it's a little funny. It has an entry and an exit. If you look here again, it enters the skull bone. Nerve number 7, facial nerve, pars acousticus internus, enters the pars petrosa of the temporal bone. And then there is an exit from the cranial bone, forms styloastroidal. It is also an exit from the temporal bone, and here this process is called process styloidus, and then of course these forms are called forms styloastroidal, and the main function is the facial muscles. It's motor. That's how the facial nerve is, we notice it. The facial nerve is responsible for the facial muscles, facial muscles. Since it's muscles, then it's the motor skills for the muscles, motor skills. Here we can see it again in a better way, the pars acousticus internus, and then forms styloastroidal. Furthermore, there is another function for the facial nerve. It's not motor, but sensory, and it is responsible for taste in the front 2/3 of the tongue. We can refer to this area as here. It's sensory. Nerve number 8 is the vestibulocochlear nerves. Important to note, it also has a passage, pars acousticus internus. It's just like nerve number 7, the facial nerve. It occurs together with the facial nerve and is sensory for the hearing and balance organs. That's why it's called the vestibulocochlear nerves. It's connected to the vestibules in the cochlea. Nerve number 9 is called nervus plussopharyngeus. Plussu means tongue in Latin, and pharynx also means throat. It comprises of passage that forms jugularis, and it innervates the pharyngeal muscles, motor functions, and the tongue. But it is sensitivity and sensory. Nerve number 10 is called the vagus nerve. The passage is also similar to nerve number 9 and also nerve number 11. It shapes the jugular. The main task is porosympathy, supplying the intestines and taste in the back part, in the back of the tongue. It is sensory, but it has pharyngeal muscles and motor functions. It is a very important nerve. Functions also smell here on the olfactory field of the nose's roof, the second nebulous part. The optic nerve is named gust in this canal. It is a part of the alarm minor. It is for new data and when the two take recordings. Where the optic nerves from the right and left meet is called this. The convergence point is called the plasma opticum, and then comes the tractus. The main optic tract function is sensory, and it is sensory, and the retinal counting project into success is still being developed. More details and more beautiful pictures are being reported, known as nervous. The ocular motorist that is going crazy is the fissure orbitalis superior. What we need to know briefly about the supraorbital fissure is that the fissure orbital superior is formed exclusively by the USS of Idale. It is a split ala minor and ala major. Yes, the orbital superior in the exception is for new data, and the main functions are movement and the eye root's ocular motor skills. Through the innervation of the most external eye muscles, it is very important. What's important is the inner eye muscles are called the outer eye muscles. The nerve teacher, it's like nervus oculomotoris, the crazy is. Through the fissure orbital superior, and it is. Also, in front of the outer eye muscles, it is motor, and the function almost similar as movement of the eye mule-like. The third, and now we go to the sixth nervus. Abducens nervus abducens is also a bit the same as the third and fourth. That when crazy also runs the fissure orbital superior. It is also responsible for the external eye muscles. It is motor and moves the eyes. Why it is called abducens? Because that is for the abduction of the eye muscles. The eye muscles that are responsible for the abduction of the eye muscles. There is a different innervation of and the muscles, and dismisses the innervation and the eyes and the nerves abducens. The sensory nervus oculomotoris and the nervous teacher. Now let's go over the trigeminal nerve 5. It is a thick nerve and it has different tasks, and it consists of 3 main parts. The first one is called nervus ophthalmicus and is also similar to the numbers 2, 3, and 6, fissure orbitalis superior. The second one is called the maxillary nerve, in particular rotundum here, and the last one is called the mandibular nerve. The last one is called the mandibular nerve, especially the oval one. Here the maxillary nerve, the 5th nerve, is called the trigeminal nerve, and it consists of 3 main ones. The first is called nervus ophthalmicus. The German fissure orbitalis superior is like the nerve. Number 2, the 5th nerve is called the trigeminal nerve, and it consists of 3 main parts: ophthalmic nerve, maxillary nerve, and mandibular nerve. The ophthalmicus nerve has gone crazy like nerve number 3, the oculomotoris. Nerve number 4 is the teacher's nerve, and nerve number 6 abducens were crazy, where all these nerve fissure orbitals superior are. Yes, here it is called for the maxillary nerve, and which goes crazy is mainly rotundum, and the nerve mandibular nerve is mainly oval, which has different functions. But generally, one can say the sensitivity of the face and the innervation of the hardly any muscles. And these nerves have pressure points and touch points on the face. The innervation of the muscles and the 3 ends of the trigeminal nerve, which are connected to each coupling. These are connected to each coupling. Various tasks. Number 11 is called the accessory nerve. It also has a similar configuration as ukuleles, and its main function is the innervation for the nerves, for the muscular strength, sternocleidomastoid, and so on. These are the motor functions. So, nerve number 9, nerve number 10, and nerve number 11. They all have a connection, especially ukuleles, but with different tasks. The path around the head and the sternocleidomastoid. The last is called the hypoglossal nerve. It is a purely motor nerve. The passage is the canal is the hypoglossal nerve, and its main function is the motor function of the tongue muscles. For the inner tongue muscles and the outer tongue muscles and the outer and inner tongue muscles. Well, now I should say goodbye to you and see you in the